From Studio 4 in the world headquarters of RT America in our nation's capital, this is the News with Rick Sanchez.
Hi, everybody. I'm Rick Sanchez. We are now, some 24 hours removed from the moment last night where we all took a deep breath and we pondered the unimaginable, right? A full-scale war between the United States and Iran, one that would make the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan look like, I don't know, skirmishes? But somewhere in our coverage, as we, like people all over the world, were trying to figure out what was going on, we heard a comment that seemed extremely telling. You see, unlike Fox and CNN, who were interviewing politicians last night, one talking to Republicans, the other one talking to Democrats, none of whom seemed to know what the hell was going on, we decided last night that we would talk to sources in Iran to try and get their perspective. Why not, right? And what we learned from our interview with Mohammad Marandi, an Iranian scholar and a man with his finger on the pulse of the conflict, maybe best explains why we're not at war today. It has to do with one word, oil, oil. You see, he told us, speaking with almost surprising level of authority and insight, that what Iran had done last night, first person to say this, was simply a show of force to illustrate what they could really do if the United States were to attack. Marandi said, "We will not hit the United States next time. We will hit those who help the United States. We will attack the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia." Those are his words. You know, the message seemed clear. You hit us, and we will muck up the world's oil supply overnight. Is that why this war did not escalate? Because to the so-called neocons in charge of America's foreign policy, oil means money, and wars are fought to make money. With his usual bravado, President Trump took to the podium this morning to declare that it's not about oil.
We are now the #1 producer of oil and natural gas anywhere in the world. We are independent, and we do not need Middle East oil.
Well, despite what the president says, the money flow from oil to the U.S. does not begin or end at the U.S. borders. It's global. It's global. And in that vein, no one is more important than Saudi Arabia. Now, guess who the president of the United States was on the phone with last night? Guess who he was talking to? As revealed to you only right here, live on our air during our coverage by a veteran Israeli journalist. Listen.
President Trump, a few hours ago, met with the Saudi Vice Minister of Defense, Khalid bin Salman, MBS's younger brother, who was on a mission from his brother. The Saudis and other U.S. Gulf allies know that what the Iranians have shown tonight could very well hit them.
Hit them. Hit them. That's the aha moment. Hit them means hit their oil, the world's oil, their money, which they share with the neocons in Washington because they're in business together. These are the people who make the real decisions on matters of war. These are the people advising the president, along with a guy named, as we just learned, bin Salman of Saudi Arabia. Wow. This is the News with Rick Sanchez, with something to think about, where we believe it's time to do news again. Here's our list of the questions that we think you'll be asking tomorrow. Has another decision about war come down to oil? And was the whole thing a show? Who is really making decisions about war? And is it really about winning or just money? Why are scientists warning about 5G safety concerns suddenly coming under attack? But let's go ahead and begin with what is starting to appear almost like a charade of sorts, as we learned tonight that the Iranians were never really serious about really attacking U.S. military bases. They fired with precision at sand and concrete. in order to hit no one. That was the plan. So in the end, yes, this was a show of force, except that it was all show and no force. And guess what? The Iraqis and the U.S. appeared to be in on this. I can't help but ask, did our leaders know this wasn't a real attack and yet allowed us all to squirm for the sake of what? A reality show produced and co-produced by Iran and the United States of America? It's a little troubling to think of that, but I think we should explore it. Joining us now, former Pentagon official Mike Maloof, former State Department official Jim Jatras. I want to start with you, Michael, because you were here last night at exactly 6:57 when we were, I mean, I looked at your face. You looked concerned. I was concerned. We all have families. We're all Americans. We didn't know whether we were on the edge of the precipice last night. What we learn now is it wasn't a real attack per se. At least they knew they weren't attacking real people. The thing that you kept saying last night.
We had advance notice. There was no question about it, and it came through the Prime Minister's office, and we picked it up through technical means. We knew we knew instantly as soon as those engines on those missiles were ignited that something was coming. We could narrow it down to the timing of when they were going to be hitting. We just didn't know the volume.
But it bothers me. I mean, it almost sounds like what you're saying is, well, we hit them, now they have to hit us, and we're going to have to pretend that we're in this little game together. And
well,
I think that's BS, man.
They had domestic considerations. They had to let the people of Iran know that they meant business. They stood up to the United States. It was all puffery in that respect. But what Morandi said as well is very important. The next round will include not against the U.S. because they know they cannot go up against the U.S. Widget for widget, but they will hit the resources, the oil, the production means, and destroy UAE and Saudi Arabia, and that's a known fact. And I would add, they might even seed the entire Persian Gulf with mines to destroy the economies of Europe.
The sense I got last night was up to that point when Morandi said that. I don't know if you were here. I think Jim was here.
Yeah, Jim was here.
When I heard Morandi say that, I almost thought to myself, okay, this ain't going to happen. Because I know in my heart of hearts that nothing is more important for the powerful in my country than oil from Saudi Arabia and from the UAE.
And this is where I respectfully disagree with you, Rick. I think it is a factor, but not necessarily in the way you're stating it. Certainly it has a corruptive effect on our politics. All that money from the Gulf has a corruptive effect on our politics. However, as the president put it, we don't really need that oil. If it's a question of having an oil lifeline, an energy lifeline, let the Japanese or the Chinese or the Indians take care of the Gulf. Why are we there? And that's where you get beyond just the question, do we need these resources? For example, the partisans of Israel that are most keen on destroying Iran, for them it's not about oil. It's a much bigger agenda when it comes to the Middle East, and it comes down to why is the Washington establishment bent on world domination, of which, yes, the Middle East is a very important thing because it's important to everybody else's oil, but it's not necessarily important to the United States or the American people.
But let me come back at you. You're the one who said on this show many times, we have vassals.
Yes.
And we protect those vassals. It's almost as if, Saudi Arabia is our 51st state. Well, Israel's 51. Saudi Arabia is number 2. Right, exactly. But
Emirates the 53.
But we will not allow, attacking them is attacking us. That oil is our oil.
It's our oil because it's a mean to global domination, not because it means anything to the United States.
And Saudi Arabia just bought $400 billion worth of military equipment. It's jobs. It's feeding the military industrial complex.
Influence peddling as well.
It is. It's all influence
They use
peddling.
their money as a lever over us as well, and that's connected to oil too, of course.
By the way, I got to ask you guys something. Something really weird happened late into the night last night. You were here. Suddenly a plane goes down in the middle of all this. Here's Jamie Finch, our NTSB expert, talking about it just this afternoon here on RT America.
This could be a missile strike. It could be an incendiary device or a bomb on board. It could also be something that was in cargo that jostled and caught on fire. It also could be a mechanical failure of an engine or a wiring issue. So it's just way too early to speculate on what the cause of this accident was.
It looks extremely bizarre, really weird, bizarre circumstances, but you know, I really believe in our business we should not be conspiracy theorists. I don't see a connection here as far as everything I've read today. Do you guys disagree?
The timing is very suspicious.
Of course.
Now, does that mean there's any evidence, any explanation whatsoever at this point? You know, that it was shot down, a missile, whatever it might be. They're also, I don't think.
I think it's irresponsible at this point to say, "Whoa."
Yeah, but I also understand why the Iranians don't want to turn the black boxes over to Boeing, because they're not sure what kind of political spin that's going to lead to if they do that. So we may never really know what happens.
It's really a matter of trust at this point, and man, it is in a bad place.
There ain't no trust.
There ain't no trust. Yeah,
Zero.
The famous words of Jim Jatras. There ain't no trust. Thank you, thank you.
Yeah,
Good stuff, guys. As you can see, we here are committed to bringing you the latest developments on this dangerous and ever-changing story. But we also want to give you a big picture look, because you know, without context, this story becomes just another list of news nuggets, right? And it should be more than that. For example, if it's true that the assassination of Soleimani may hasten our retreat from Iraq, as we reported, it's not an isolated incident. In fact, there seems to be a pattern emerging of this type of thing. Let me take you through some of these. In fact, we've put this map together to show you, and we're going to start with Iraq. The U.S. is being pushed out of Iraq, and that is providing an open door to Iran, not to mention others like Saudi Arabia, who now also seem interested in reaching its tentacles into Iraq. Think about that. And now let's go from Iraq to Afghanistan, where the U.S. has spent 18 years in a war which began as a mission. Think about this. It was a mission to knock the Taliban out. Today, the U.S. is poised to finally walk away from the longest war in our history and cede control of the country to whom? To the Taliban. Now let's take a look at Libya. Here, after being involved in the intervention and a coup which led to the collapse of the government, the U.S. troops were recently evacuated. Who's filling the vacuum? Turkey, who is planning to send in troops now. Let's go to Syria. There, too, the U.S., along with other Western countries, supported a coup to remove the government of Bashar Assad, but it failed, and he's still in power. The U.S. removed itself from the conflict, leaving it to others, including Russia, to try and clean up the mess, I guess. So think about that. If it's the case that the U.S. has indeed pushed out in all of these countries after intervening, then we're left to ask, was there ever really a goal? Or was it all about the money that is made from these wars? In the wars and interventions mentioned above, the U.S. has spent roughly $6 trillion, plus another $7 trillion that is owed, that will be paid off in years to come. That's a total of $11 trillion that could have been spent here on education, on roads, on public welfare, on health care. Think about it. Instead, it was spent on wars that didn't even accomplish what we were told they were set out to do. But to the people who make money on these wars, the ones who furnish the missiles and the warplanes and the tanks and the private soldiers who have taken the large share of that $11 trillion, let me ask you a question. Does the result really matter? Joining us now is Danny Sjursen to talk about this. Danny, you have experience teaching at West Point. I mean, you're a guy who's got military in your blood. I'm bothered as an American, as a journalist, by some of the things I'm seeing. It seems to me this thing that we covered last night was in large measure almost a show, a charade. Like maybe we're being played by the people who actually stand to gain by these exercises. Maybe even this one. Even if it goes to war, it's still a game for them. Am I wrong?
No, I think you're absolutely right. First of all, I mean, I'm thankful that there were no U.S. casualties, but I am disturbed by the whole charade. William Hartung of the Center for International Policy referred to Trump's strategy as the P.T. Barnum strategy, right? More show than substance. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the case. And it goes both ways, you know, from Iran and also from the Trump administration. But I think here's the thing. We cannot believe the hype that we're about to hear from the Trumpeteers at Fox and elsewhere. Because what they're going to say is that Trump, the stable genius, the deal maker, struck again. and that he foresaw this all along. He knew Iran would show restraint. I think that's a really dangerous way to look at it, because at best, if Trump does show some restraint now, which it looks like he may, which I think Iran allowed him that space to do it, if he shows some restraint, I think the best he's done is maintain the status quo. But the status quo is a very, very unstable situation between Iran and the United States, and that's just unacceptable.
But it's not even just this. Let's look at our history. We've put this map together because we were thinking about this yesterday, and it's all a charade. I mean, look, let's go ahead and start in Iraq, right? Where we decided that we would spend $2.8 trillion. And if you look at Iraq, it's going to end up most likely in the hands of Iran. Iran, the very place that we were told that we should not go to war with because it would end up in their hands. Let's go to Afghanistan. We went in saying we were going to remove the Taliban. Guess who we're now negotiating to give the power back to after 18 years? The Taliban. Let's look at Libya. We went in there and destabilized the country. Now Turkey is going to grab Libya. Syria, a place that we went in and tried to destabilize, tried to do a coup. It's going to end up in the hands of Russia. Every single one of these places where we were either at war or where we intervened, we got the opposite result of what we wanted. Danny, I'm not sure the people in power, the people who make money off of these conflagrations, care whether we accomplished our mission or not. They get paid either way.
I'm increasingly persuaded that that's the case. If you look at every single American intervention in the greater Middle East since 9/11, every single one, count them, and you just counted a few, they've all turned out counterproductive. At the best, they're a quagmire. At worst, we've made matters far more dangerous and unstable. I mean, it makes one almost a conspiracy theorist, and I'm not that.
Right.
But it's hard not to think along those lines after you just, I'm a historian, so, I like to look at the evidence in an inductive way since September 12th, 2001, and it is really, really disturbing. As a military man, as a citizen, and heck, as a member of the human race, the amount of money and lives that we spent, my brothers and sisters, but also maybe 1 million foreigners. It's disgraceful. This will be one of the great blots on American history, I promise you.
Danny Sjursen, as usual, my thanks to you for joining us and taking us through this really important conversation. Let's stay on this. I think we may be onto something. And I think the American people need to have and understand this conversation as well moving forward, because they ain't going to get it from CNN, they ain't going to get it from the New York Times, and they ain't going to get it from Fox News. Danny Sjursen, thanks again.
Thanks. Always glad to be on.
Sometimes ain't really is the right word choice. By the way, we're going to continue our series on the rollout of 5G, the so-called next generation of wireless technology. All this week, we're focusing on the questions that are being raised around 5G and what's really happening when it's literally everywhere. Then what, right? And this is the time to ask the question before it gets everywhere. For example, scientists, some of them who raise questions, are being attacked. We ask why. Here to tackle the question of 5G is our special correspondent, Michele Greenstein. What do you have for us tonight?
You just finished talking with Danny Sjursen about the war on terror. And abroad, the war on terror is all about, bombing people, et cetera. Right. But at home, the other side to these war on terror policies is surveillance, and that's actually exactly what 5G is about. What we have with 5G is the ability to have smart city energy grids, water systems, self-driving cars. None of this would be possible without the rollout of 5G, which means every single device in your home has the possibility of being connected to the internet. We're talking everything from refrigerators to water bottles to babies' diapers. These are just some of the things that the industry is working on developing. But of course, in order to transmit that amount of data, you're going to need exactly what we're looking at right now. Carriers are going to need these kind of base stations every few hundred feet. And so if the telecom industry's plans come to fruition, then no person or animal for that matter will be able to avoid exposure to this radio frequency radiation. And the problem with that is this: the peer-reviewed scientific literature that's been conducted independently already shows that RF radiation is harmful to biological life. So it's actually a biological toxin. Now, in the past, we've talked talked about the international appeal from over 180,000 scientists and doctors telling the UN to halt this international rollout. We've also talked about the largest, most expensive study to date connecting wireless radiation with things like cancers, which showed that rats that were exposed to this kind of radiation did develop brain tumors. But now I want to talk about how this is also a hazard to healthy reproduction, because we know, again, from independent scientific literature that men who keep cell phones in their pockets the longest have the lowest sperm count. And it's interesting because much of this research is not coming out of the US, it's coming out of Europe. And that has a lot to do with the funding that we see in a lot of our research institutions. But what's really significant is that the current standards for cell phone use, which were set up in the 90s, happened when the typical user was an adult male. It was typical, military, maybe medical or business person. And they set up these standards to avoid heating that kind of man, an over, the average weight person with a larger head. And here's how they set up those standards: a 6-minute phone call. So obviously these standards are out of date because people are now exposed to radiation continuously. Almost all of us have our phones on us all of the time. A lot of people sleep with their routers on.
So the study has not the research has not kept up with the culture.
That's right. And we have to ask the question of, why is talk about this kind of research marginalized? So I spoke with Cecilia Doucette, who's the founder of a nonprofit called Wireless Education. She thinks that we need to get our public policy caught up with this science, and that the industry's deep pockets and the big lobbies are the reasons that many communities don't know that this radiation is a biological toxin. Take a listen.
Oftentimes you see that an industry will make a huge donation to a university that has been doing independent scientific investigation on radio frequency. And before you know it, the scientist labs are closed down and they've lost their position. So long as the industry has control of the media and has control of our universities and has control of our government agencies, then they kind of have free rein to deploy the tobacco playbook, spin the good science so that we never see it, create their own science in short-term conditions that were done to deliberately show no harm, and continue to promote their toxic products, making it look like, oh, this is so great, 5G and the Internet of Things and faster speeds and greater downloads and all this data. But what do we even need that for?
So we have the fact that, sponsored research can induce a bias. People are hired to do these studies that find no effect. We also have the fact that the FCC is largely bought off by the corporations that it's meant to regulate, right? And even a Harvard 2015 study confirmed that. But let me end you with one last thing. People used to smoke tobacco in airplanes. And a doctor that was involved in the committee that reviewed this data and recommended that people would stop smoking in airplanes said that the telecom industry makes the tobacco industry look like amateurs when it comes to cooking the science.
By the way, I used to be one of those persons who smoked on airplanes. Alzheimer's affects more than 5.7 million Americans. And for those of us with someone we love afflicted by it, it is extremely frustrating and painful. It makes us begin to wonder as we live longer if we're all going to be at some point afflicted by this. Here's the good news. Scientists say they have a potential vaccine. Here's Natasha Sweatte.
As more people are affected by Alzheimer's and the memory issues that come along with it, scientists are hopeful when it comes to finding a cure. In fact, researchers out of the University of Irvine say human trials for a new Alzheimer's vaccine is less than 2 years away. Researchers say advancements in 2019 with mice testing has cleared the way for more extensive research in 2020. A team out of the University of Irvine developed an injection which removes dementia plaques from the brains of mice. These plaques are reportedly formed by clumping of the naturally occurring protein amyloid beta and the protein tau. Scientists believe these two proteins bring about cognitive decline. UC Irvine's research proved to be very promising among rodents. After administering the vaccine, levels of both proteins rapidly lowered. So now scientists say if brain plaque can be conquered in mice, there is a chance the same can be done for humans. According to the Alzheimer's Society, the disease impacts roughly 62% of those with dementia. And in the U.S., at least 5.8 million are living with Alzheimer's. Now, health experts say it's a complex condition that is poorly understood. And because of this, as of right now, there is no certain way to prevent the disease. Previous studies indicate it's vital to attack these two proteins together, which both stimulate mental decline. Results from UC Irvine published in the journal Alzheimer's Research and Therapy suggest the two vaccines could in fact reduce both proteins tied to brain plaque. Previous attempts for failed Alzheimer's vaccines have focused on attacking only one of the two proteins tied to cognitive decline. So the treatment for both proteins should be available for human trials in the next 2 years. Reporting in Los Angeles, Natasha, Sweatte, RT.
Finally tonight, there are countless stars in the sky, but there's only one that's associated with Christmas, right? I'm talking about the Star of Bethlehem. Many of us who are Christian, and by that I mean about 2 billion of us, we grew up with the Star of Bethlehem in songs and in stories that were handed down to us. The star is surrounded in mystery. After all, why would it suddenly appear if not as a way to guide the 3 wise men to the baby Jesus? Well, astronomers are now chiming in. Here is RT's Trinity Chavez.
For more than 2 millennia, the Star of Bethlehem, better known as the Christmas star, has been fascinating astronomers. Experts have even been speculating about the cause of the star for centuries, trying to figure out exactly what it is and if it even really exists. But now one researcher is sharing possible explanations for the mysterious astronomical wonder. The Star of Bethlehem is mentioned in St. Matthew's Gospel and is one of the main symbols associated with the birth of Jesus. But it is also an inexhaustible subject of debate as a scientific phenomenon as to what is really going on in the sky that led a group of men to travel for 8 to 10 months toward the town of Bethlehem.
It's possible to use stars for navigation.
For centuries, the star has been the center of debate on whether or not a star actually appeared in the sky to lead the Magi to Bethlehem. But some believe that the symbol was nothing more than a literary device.
In ancient cultures, astronomy and astrology were typically tied. They were unified. The positions of stars and planets were kept track of, and there may have actually been a particular planetary alignment that meant that there would be a birth of a king.
While there's still a lack of documentation, records about astronomical events like this one actually do exist.
A lot of astronomers who want to look at ancient astronomical events typically refer to Chinese recordings. Just to be clear, it's not only Chinese recordings. There are also, for example, Arabian recordings that keep track of these ancient events.
And while some researchers say that if it actually did exist, the Star of Bethlehem was a comet, a supernova, or a triple conjunction.
It's a triple conjunction, where there are 2 objects that meet up, whether it's a star and a planet, or a planet or 2 planets aligning. It happens 3 times over the course of a short period of time.
After analyzing the data, Castillo says that he thinks that it could actually be a variable star.
My favorite theory is that of a variable star, where the variable is a star who increases or decreases its light intensity. Its period could be anywhere between the matter of hours to years.
While there are still no clear answers about the Star of Bethlehem, there is one thing that experts are sure of, and that is the continuation of this debate. Reporting in New York, Trinity Chavez, RT.
Thank you. That's our news. I'm Rick Sanchez. Thanks so much for being with us. We'll be back when it's time to do news again.